Hey everyone. Since we published our own version of Rapunzel and the Evil Queen, I thought it would be interesting to think a little bit about the movie Tangled and how it differs from the original Rapunzel story, how it's the same, and what those differences mean. It's interesting because Tangled, in some ways, appeared at a moment where Disney was slowly pushing towards more and more kind of ideological ideas, but had not yet fully embraced it. And so what you have with the story Tangled is a massive change in the original fairy tale. But at the same time, because it is well written, the jokes are funny, there's a lot of good stuff in there, the movie still is successful, even though now looking back at it from the point of view of the Disney collapse, you could call it, or, Disney becoming incapable of telling these fairy tale stories, you can already see the glimmers of all of what would happen in the future and lead to them now basically have given up on fairy tales.
This is Jonathan Pajot. Welcome to the Symbolic World.
Hello, everyone. We are finally announcing our Paradiso class. We have done 2 already. We have the Inferno, we have the Purgatory, and now we are moving to Paradise.
That is right. Dante himself says in Inferno that we prefer hell to paradise. And similarly, most of us prefer to read Inferno, but when we come to reading Paradiso, we're very confused. So we're going to be actually taking you through that poem line by line, like we did with Inferno and Purgatorio, and actually looking at how Dante very carefully reconciles some of the contradictory traditions about the heavens in the Christian apocalyptic tradition, and does that through the persons of the saints.
And so this is truly important for us right now with the re-enchantment of the world happening. We have to be able to look at those that did it in the most powerful way, that were able to reconcile the ancient pagan traditions with Christianity, with his modern understanding, the most modern understanding of the cosmos that he had. And so this is the work that we need to do, and so we need to learn from Dante. So the course starts November 5th to December 3rd, right? Is that what I've got? 5 weeks,
right.
2 to 5 on Wednesdays.
So the cost is going to be $190 US, but we do have an early bird sale through the month of October, which bumps it down to $161. You can use the code Early Paradiso, and that is good through the end of October.
And the Inferno and the Purgatorio class are also on sale at the same time, so you have 50% off during the month of October. Code Dante50, and that means you have no excuse.
That's right.
So if you haven't taken the first classes, now is the chance to scoop all that up.
Yeah, and if you don't want to watch live or it doesn't work for your schedule, you'll be able to follow along at your own pace, just like with all of our courses. You'll have access to lecture recording, slides, additional readings, and you can still ask questions and interact with your fellow classmates in our circle forums.
And so join us. After all of this suffering through Inferno and Purgatorio, the symbolic world finally goes to heaven.
Yeah, join us.
And so the story Tangled is actually quite a loose retelling of the story of Rapunzel. The basic aesthetic of it is there, but they've changed several things. The first thing that they've changed is, of course, in the original tale, Rapunzel's plight happens because her parents have made a deal with an evil witch, in some ways that they have traded cabbages for the child, because the woman who's pregnant, she's hungry for cabbages. So the husband accepts this very weird compromise where he takes the cabbage and ultimately accepts, even though not totally believing it, I guess, accepts that the witch is going to take the child. And it's funny because you could see how you would want to change that part of the story, because it seems improbable that parents would trade their child for cabbage, that someone would trade their only child for cabbage. But if you back away a little bit and you look at the original story from a little bit of a distance, you realize that in fact this is something that is happening all the time now. With, of course, the huge amount of abortion, and you can see that many people, in fact, are willing to give up their child, for the pleasures of the belly, you could call it, right? And in terms also of contraception, all of these types of behaviors that the modern world has taken, it's in fact quite normal for people to give up their child or give up a child for the pleasures of immediate pleasures, you could say. And even people who sometimes decide not to have children, couples who get married and decide not to have children, they usually frame it as children are a weight or something that would get in the way of their aspiration, of their own personal aspirations. Of course, usually it's not framed as, let's say, superficially as something you want to eat or the desire of the belly. But in the story, this is really the best way to represent it. It's the idea of sacrificing true meaning for a more immediate pleasure. Now, in the Tangled story, they change that, where in fact, the witch, Gothel, Mother Gothel, she is using this magical flower in order to stay young and to remain beautiful. And when they use the flower to heal the queen who is sick so that she can have her child, Mother Gothel is angry and goes and steals the child away from the mother. Now, although it's different from the original story, it's a quite beautiful and powerful image to help us see what it is that's going on, that in some ways Gothel is using beauty in a superficial way. She doesn't seem to have children. She doesn't seem to be married. She seems to be obsessed with keeping herself young. And so she wants to capture this power of beauty for that purpose. But in the case of the queen, this beauty, you could say, or this power of youth and the power of beauty, all of this idea is actually put in service of her being able to have a child, right, and to have a family. And so you can see how, although it's different, it's quite subtle and quite smartly similar to the version of Rapunzel from the original fairy tales, that it is, again, a choice between something like artificial, superficial beauty and youth, compared to beauty and youth at the service of something higher, which is, of course, a child and to have a family. So it's pretty smart. And what they do, of course, which is not in the original tale, is that they make the Rapunzel flower, because it's not clear whether Rapunzel is a cabbage or a flower in the ancient stories. There's like versions where it seems like it's either one. They make the flower the source of this youth, you could say, the source of this capacity to stay young and to stay beautiful. And so then what happens, of course, in the Tangled story is that the reason why Gothel wants to keep Rapunzel in the tower is, of course, because she is a tool, right? She's a tool. She uses this child as a way to get her own desires, right? As a way to make sure that she stays young. And now Rapunzel, with her long golden hair, she now becomes the source of the magic, which will keep the witch young. So she keeps her in the tower, and she has her sing a song, and this song is what will keep her young. Now, again, like I said, it's different from the original story, but it is quite powerful. Because you could say that it's, again, in some ways, the idea of having a child or protecting a child or having a child for the wrong reasons or using them for your own glorification or your own purposes, but then also youth itself as a tool in order to remain powerful and to have influence on others, because that is, of course, Gothel. You see the way that she acts with Rapunzel, that she is manipulating, she is controlling her. And so she also becomes this image of the devouring mother in the Union sense, which is there in the original tale for sure, that the witch is really this devouring mother. Like, she wants to overprotect Rapunzel. In the original story, it's not clear. Her motivations aren't spelled out. In our version of the book, we tried to make those coherent. We try to dramatically explain why the queen is trying to protect Rapunzel in the tower. But I think Disney also saw that there was this narrative problem in the story, or in terms of our modern narrative sensibilities, that you had to justify, like, why would this witch want to keep Rapunzel in the tower? And so they kind of worked all of this out in order to find a solution. The biggest difference between the two stories is, of course, in the love story. In the story of Rapunzel, the original fairy tales, in some ways, you have this trope of the overprotective mother who is refusing for the girl to develop herself fully and be able to go out into the world, obviously, and find a husband, found a family. So the witch is trying to keep Rapunzel for herself, and also not preparing her for her growing up, for her becoming a woman. And so what it sets up is this opposition where she guards her too much. And because she guards her, the prince comes to encounter her, and then they fall in love, and she gets pregnant in the tower, which is what you see in the original stories. So there's a kind of, it's a kind of two extremes, where on the one hand, because she protected her too much and didn't, prepare her for becoming a mother, for becoming a wife, then she plays around with fire, and then she gets pregnant in the tower without being married and without being with the prince. And this, of course, now in the Tangled version, like, none of this is there. Now, the story of Rapunzel is reduced, I think, in this case now, is reduced to this idea of self-development. And so Rapunzel is trapped in this tower. She wants to go out. She wants to explore. She wants to discover the world, and that is what the story ends up being about. Is some way she has to break free from the stricture of her devouring mother in order to fully realize herself. And interestingly enough, in the Tangled movie, that love story becomes very secondary in the story. It's almost like tagged on at the end. You're not even sure. At the end, they kind of get married, but even in the way that it's described, as if this is really not that important in the thrust of the story.
Did Rapunzel and I ever get married? Well, I'm pleased to tell you that after years and years of asking and asking and asking, I finally said yes.
What's mostly important in the thrust of the story is in some ways Rapunzel's own self-development. And when you look back at it now, when you see from the point of view of 2025, the Tangled, you already see all the girl boss motifs that are there in Tangled that were burgeoning. And so I remember watching it before and liking it, and thinking it was funny and thinking it was well done. But now you look back and you realize that the Flynn character is absolutely useless. The Flynn character all through the story is only a kind of obstacle to the development of Rapunzel. He's lying, he's doing all these things. He's trying to get her to give him the crown, right up till the end. When they get stuck in the tavern, she's the one who helps them escape, et cetera, et cetera. She's always kind of saving him, finding the solutions. And of course, at the very end of the story, you realize that all of this is a setup so that she saves the prince. Now, in the story of Rapunzel, the original story, it is Rapunzel that saves the prince. It's actually a very powerful example to know that these stories don't always go one way, that in fact the stories have all kinds of different possibilities in them. In the early story of Rapunzel, Rapunzel cries on the blind prince and then makes him see again and reintegrates him into his family that he in some ways has been alienated from, because of him falling in the thorns. But in the Tangled story, the hair is an image of this external beauty, right? It's the idea of something that is on the outside that is making you beautiful. That is, of course, there in the original Rapunzel story as well. And that's why it's the tool by which the witch is able to remain externally beautiful while being, internally ugly and becoming more and more horrible on the inside. She's still able to maintain this external beauty. So you can imagine the hair as a kind of outer shell that could be represented as, makeup or surgical transformations, facelift or whatever, nose job, all of these external things that we do to our body to stay young, or Botox. And in some ways, that is what it manifests it has several symbols in the story, but that is definitely the main aspect of what's going on. And it's very precious for that reason. It's her youth. It's an image of this kind of this youthfulness, but youthfulness as this outside representation of beauty. And Flynn, she's willing to kind of sacrifice everything, ultimately the thing that she wanted, which is to be free. She is willing to sacrifice that in order to save Flynn at the very end of the movie when Flynn is dying. And then Flynn realizes that he also has to sacrifice himself. It's a beautiful image at the end. And it's a great idea to have Flynn cut her hair instead of the witch in the context of the story that is told. And then what happens is that as he cuts off her hair, in some ways, as he is willing to sacrifice her external beauty and the externals of her beauty, then she discovers that the true beauty, right, is inside, and that she has changed, she has matured, and because she was willing to sacrifice herself for Flynn, then she, in some ways, the magic has moved inside her heart, and now she can heal Flynn with her tears that well up from inside. And so it's actually a very powerful, beautiful image, but it is quite different from the original Rapunzel. In the original Rapunzel, what you have is, instead of this being mostly a journey of self-discovery, although, like I said, at the end, there is this beautiful moment of kind of self-sacrifice on both sides of the fence with Flynn and Rapunzel. In the original Rapunzel, it's mostly about their union. That is what's the most important thing about it. So you can understand that in the original Rapunzel, Rapunzel's hair also acts as this external beauty. So think about the prince coming and seeing this beautiful hair and being attracted by this beautiful hair. And then in some ways, what is his motivation for coming to see Rapunzel in the tower? And I think what's intimated in the story is that he's not going there for the right reasons. He's going there because of her external beauty, and also because, obviously, of the romance that he develops with her in the tower. But in the story of Rapunzel, he never takes her out of the tower, right? He never saves her. Why? Well, because he's not completely clear on what his intentions are and what is the reason why he is trying to get Rapunzel. And the power of the story is that when the witch, in some ways, uses the hair to trick the prince, you can think that he has been tricked. That is, he has been too attentive to her external beauty and to the things that it procures him, including pleasure and sexual pleasure, that he has not been paying attention to her voice, you could say, or to her inner self and to the true Rapunzel that is behind the hair. So that now when he goes up the tower and he encounters the evil witch, he has been tricked. But there's something deeper going on in the original Rapunzel story, which is that any man, right, if you enter into a relationship, any man that enters into a relationship with a woman for only those reasons, only the reasons of external beauty, only the reasons, of the pleasure that comes from that external beauty, will one day wake up and realize that woman is now old, and if you haven't been able to transfer that interest to the real person, right, to the person that is on the inside, then you will be alienated, right? And you will become blind, just like in the story of Rapunzel. So in the story of Rapunzel, he falls and he's blinded by the pricks, blinded by the thorns, and he wanders for several years until he's able to hear Rapunzel's voice again. And that is something that sadly happens to many men who, when their wife starts to have children, obviously having children will change a woman's body, will change her, let's say, her priorities, right, will change all kinds of things about her. And if that relationship isn't strong, then it can be a moment where men are alienated. And sadly, some men might leave. Like, these are the stories of men who abandon their families. And then some men might wander for a while until they're able to see the goodness that is behind it all and the true purpose of all of this, which is the creation of a family. So although the story of Tangled is very powerful and beautiful in the way that it brings together these two self-sacrifices in the end, the story of self-realization, I think, is weaker and not as strong as the story of true union, right? The story of moving towards something that completely transcends you and joins you together in the creation of a family. And sadly, in the Tangled movie at the end, that is treated almost like a detail as Rapunzel returns to the castle and is joined with her family. And so I hope this was a little bit of an interesting meditation for you to consider the difference between Tangled and Rapunzel. I'm curious to know what all of you think. Did you notice the things that I mentioned in the Tangled movie? Do you think that it was already a beginning of these kind of tropes? And I say that really now in retrospect, because when I watched the Rapunzel movie, the Tangled movie, I think I was probably in my early 20s when it came out. I thought it was well done. I thought it was great. I was curious about why they had changed the elements that they changed. I think I understand it more. But obviously meditating on all that is what guided us. Obviously the original story and why it was changed and how that affects the story is some of the things that I meditated on when I wrote our own version of Rapunzel and the Evil Witch, which you can get now on Amazon, folks. We are finally on Amazon. If you're in the United States, you can get it with Prime shipping and all of that. So if you haven't gotten Rapunzel yet and our other fairy tales, please go and do that. So thanks everybody for your attention, and talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.